Hi, everybody. Mitch Chandler here. Thanks for joining me today for this week's security news update. The hackers assume that you're off, eating way too much food for the holidays, and gee, uh, let's go make your life miserable. So with that, I added a one new video blog this week. It's on how to attest to CMMC Level 1. The process for CMMC Level 2 is not there yet. I suspect it's going to be similar, but the thing with CMMC Level 1 is it's either you are compliant or you're not. There's no partial. With CMMC Level 2, you can have a POAM, and so they're probably going to add some more uh, steps to that whole process to accommodate CMMC Level 2. But they do point out multiple times that if you lie, we may go after you under the False Claims Act for lying. So don't go attest unless you are actually ready to attest. But this is a good stepping stone to getting to CMMC Level 2. In the Security and Privacy Alerts Department, we have a bunch this week. Hackers, I mean, how do you say that someone stole your source code when you just kind of left it on the front door, which is what Cisco did, or on the front step, rather? Um, they apparently put all their source code out somewhere, didn't bother to protect it. And a hacker was kind of walking by on the internet and said, interesting source code. I think I'll take it. So 4.5 terabytes of source code later, they now have large chunk of Cisco sort of 4.5 terabytes, clean out all of Cisco source code, but it's a large chunk. And they talked to Cisco, I assume. I wasn't privy to the conversation. And Cisco said, go take a long walk off a short pier. And the hacker said, thank you very much. And they started posting pieces of the source code. So source code from Cisco's Identity Services Engine, their Secure Access Service Edge, Cisco Umbrella, and the operating systems for their firewalls and routers, XE and XR, and other code. That's all available. So, you know, yeah, I know in theory, right? In theory, in theory is good in theory. Uh, having access to the source code is not supposed to make your software more vulnerable. But when theory meets reality, it turns out that it certainly does make your source code, it does make your code more vulnerable because now the hackers have access to the code with all the documentation and comments and labels and all that other stuff, which is a lot easier to dissect and reverse engineer. So expect to see a whole bunch more patches from Cisco over the next several months and assume that these things will be exploited very quickly. So be prepared to patch your Cisco stuff quickly. Next in the alerts department, this one's I think you got to give them an A for creativity. Um, Hackers are using Google Calendar to phish and compromise users, and the way it works is pretty creative. They send you a calendar invite. Sometimes to make it more believable, they include people who are people in the invite. And in the invite, there's links, and that's not unusual in invites. So curiosity being curiosity, say, I don't know what this meeting is, but let me go look at whatever the agenda is or whatever the document is. And of course, poof, you're all of a sudden now you are compromised. So they're doing that. The reason why that works as well as it does is because Google is trying to be helpful and they automatically put calendar invites, just like Microsoft does, on your calendar when they show up as unconfirmed. And now because of the fact that they're getting whacked right and left, they're adding a new feature to make things less convenient, which is off by default. You would have to turn it on if you want it, so that those calendar items don't show up on your calendar until after you accept the meeting invite. So I'm not sure that's necessarily going to make things any more secure. So I don't think I'd run out and go do that right now, but they've at least given you that option. Next, again, Google, this is Google week. I'm sure next week will be Microsoft week, whatever. Um, Hackers are using Google tools to create more legitimate looking attacks. In one case, someone lost $500,000. Don't go there. With one wrong click, uh, they sent that scammers sent a Google Forms driven alert, which Google would not do. They do not use Google Forms to alert you that your password has been compromised. And of course, in that forms, there was a link to reset your password, which he dutifully did. And the hacker said, "Thank you very much." Um, yeah, and these tools are available to any Google Doc user, even the free users. Um, and the only defense is better user training. I know, the incoming administration wants to go on offensive cyber. More power to them. I don't think it's going to work worth crap, but they're certainly welcome to go do that. Russia doesn't care. North Korea doesn't care. But even the hackers in the United States don't care. But user training is really the only defense here, unfortunately. And if you need help with your anti-phishing training, we have some great products and can help you figure that out. And lastly, in the alerts department, Sophos is patching a firewall fix or patching firewall bugs that allow hackers to become admins. They can perform SQL injection attacks, remote code execute, all kinds of nifty stuff. So if you have Sophos firewalls, now would be a good time to patch them. In the CMMC section, as those of you who are inclined to be CMMC compliant, you know that the Title 32 part of the rule went into effect last Monday. So it's getting very, very close, and the questions are getting very nuanced. So, you know, one question, for example, is can or will my prime require me to be third-party certified, even if the DoD says I can self-certify? So, questions like that, people starting to really get into the nuances of things. By the way, the answer to that question is yes. Um, in the reference section, CMMC Title 32 is now live, as I just said. And the Cyber AB released the CMMC assessment process document, which is the process that assessors will use to do the assessment. So that provides some insight into what's going on. I have links to the various documents there. In the patches department, besides the ones from up above, um, CISA says there's a Windows kernel bug um, that is being exploited now, and it has two great features. One is it's easy to exploit, what they call a low complexity bug, and it doesn't require the user to interact with it. So the combination of those two is a killer. And the bug affects the Microsoft kernel streaming service. Uh, it was patched in June. So at least in theory, if you've been diligent with your patching, you should be okay. But it is being exploited. Also, this is not a patch, but this is a important issue. Uh, BlackBerry, you may remember, bought the endpoint protection software Cylance a couple of years ago for $1.4 billion. Cylance is definitely an also run in that category. Uh, they just sold it to Arctic Wolf for $160 million. So that's kind of a loss of maybe $1.25 billion. Not a great investment after 7 years. This is another nail in the coffin of BlackBerry. And it's possible that Arctic Wolf can fix Cylance and turn it into something. I mean, part of it, of course, is BlackBerry is well beyond its prime as a marketing machine, so that's a problem. But Arctic Wolf obviously has that going in their favor, so we'll see what happens there. Next in the patches department, you may remember Apache Struts. That was the Java framework that was behind one of the largest breaches in history at Equifax. 150 million Americans lost their data. Well, it's back. Um, this time it's Struts 2, and it's being actively exploited. But at least at this point, we don't have another Equifax. The challenge we have here is that Struts 2 is long in the tooth, and a lot of the code that uses Struts 2 as a framework is not being supported, or at least not actively being supported. Will those vendors release new versions just because there's a new version of Struts 2? Maybe, don't know. Um, and the other problem you have is because we really haven't gotten any uptake on software bills of material, just like last time, users don't know where Struts 2 is being used. You may remember that places like VMware and Cisco and people like that were using Struts back in the day of Equifax. So, this is one where it's going to unwind over months, and you're not going to find out about it until people get compromised. And lastly, in the patches department, beyond trust, uh, or maybe should be not trust, their remote support cloud software was breached. The company sells, in theory, eh, fairness, all software has bugs, right? Secure remote access software and IT privileged access management software, but apparently their own site was not secure enough. Hackers gained access to an API key, which allowed them to reset other people's passwords, including system passwords. Good news is that they detected it quickly, they responded quickly, but the bad news was a couple of days later, they said, "Gee, we found more bugs." So make sure if you use Beyond Trust or your MSP uses Beyond Trust that it is patched to the current level. In the legislative and legal activities department, the EU fines Meta $263 million, roughly, whatever that is in euros, for alleged GDPR violations that happened in 2018, so 6 or 7 years ago. And this is the challenge with all this regulatory crap, right? If it takes 6 years to find somebody and not get paid, right? That's all the conversation. Because I'm sure that Meta will go complain for years over that. The process really doesn't work. And Meta admitted that happened 6 years ago. Uh, they claim that they proactively informed people about the breach. The Irish Data Protection Commission doesn't quite agree with that, but and that's really the kind of the crux of the fine. But this is basically part of their problem is their greed for data and how that's at odds for compliance with GDPR. And I don't know how you fix that. I mean, if they give up that whole leverage there, Meta is useless. Um, and their revenue is going to go in the toilet. So, on the other hand, they were fined $96 million in September, 1.3 billion in May, 4.10 million in January of last year. Yeah, yeah. Even to Zuckerberg, after a while, this could get kind of expensive. If it's not already is, that doesn't count the legal fees he's paying to defend himself. In the education department, we have a couple this week. The Cloud Security Alliance, which is an organization I really, really like, has published their report on the second rung of zero trust, and it's available for free. You do have to create a free account. And this is there's also a link to the first step document there. So it's kind of a roadmap to how you get to zero trust. If you're wrestling with zero trust, that's a good thing to read. Next, CISA released guidelines on protecting what they call senior feds from the Chinese after the Chinese attack on the telecom carriers. This is where they initially said, go out and start using encrypted messaging, and the FBI, I'm sure, is just cringing. Don't do that. We can't read that stuff if you do it. So, but anyway, these instructions, there's instructions on hardening infrastructure, and also guidance on you doing the right things, like using end-to-end encrypted messaging. So even if you're not a senior fed, if you just want to keep the bad guys out of your stuff, then that guidance is probably a good thing. And for those of you who have been watching the dumpster fire called Change Healthcare, and if you have not gotten your letters yet saying your information was compromised, I'm guessing that you are one of the few human beings in the United States who is super healthy and has never had a prescription, never been to the doctor. Anyway, there is a timeline now that TechCrunch published that lays out how all this happened and what's going on. So, I always say the best way to learn from breaches is from other people's breaches, not your own. Speaking of which, we have several this week. The SRP Credit Union in South Carolina filed this breach report with the state attorneys general. Um, Initially, they said about 500 people uh, were compromised, I think is what they said. Nope, nope. I'm getting two breaches confused. I don't know what they said initially, but anyway, they said that the hackers were in there between September 5th and November 4th, so 2 months. They stole a range of personal information, including credit information and other information. 240,000 people were affected. So if you are a member of the SRP credit union, assume that you will get a nice little notice from them. Next, Texas Tech is announcing, yay, that they lost the data on 1.4 million people. Their lawyers are calling it a temporary disruption to some computer systems and applications. The rest of us will call it ransomware, but that's what they call it. And I'm assuming that the class action attorneys will call it "you're bad." Um, but the information that was compromised includes name, address, socials, driver's license number, health information, financial information, insurance information, diagnosis, other health information. In other words, the entire enchilada. Total dumpster fire. I am sure that, well, I know there's already this lawsuit seeking class action status. 1.4 million people. Next, there's a service called Connect on Call, which is an after hours service for doctors to be able to connect with their patients. It's a kind of a digital answering service sort of thing. They lost information on about 950,000 patients. And one more time, this includes healthcare information. And to round out the breach department, more healthcare, Ascension Hospital chain, and they run about 140 hospitals and 40 senior care facilities across 19 states and DC. This is the one that initially reported a breach of 500 people, and now they said, well, not really 500. How about 5.6 million? They are blaming employee error downloading an infected file, which implies their endpoint protection software leaves something to be desired, but they are also facing proposed federal class action lawsuits. So a lot of folks are going to be making the lawyers rich in 2025. So that's the New Year's wish for the lawyers is more breaches. And I sort of alluded to this before, earlier in this video. The next administration wants to go on the offensive against China now. You know, the quote offensive is very, very light on details, but they're saying that playing defense is not working. And you can't argue with that. But it's not just China, it's all over the globe. So, going on the offensive with China, you know, maybe that's, will have some effect on Xi. I don't know. But it certainly won't solve the problem. So, we shall see. We shall see what they do. As I've said several times today, the CMMC program is in force now. We're still waiting on the Title 48 part, which is the contract clauses. That's going to happen this coming summer. But you can get certified now if you're ready. The waiting line for getting certified, we think, is about 8 months. If you think you're close, you really think you're close, you've really done the pre-certification, you've got all your documentation, all your ducks in a row, or pretty close to that, then now would be a good time to get online because if you want to be certified by third party, there is a long way. Next, Microsoft is pushing passkeys. Passkeys are a replacement for passwords. I like them. There are some, it's not really glitches, but limitations, which to me is problematic. Go check it out. Microsoft is going to go push notifications to you, which you cannot opt out of until you consent. But understand what you're getting into. It's good to a degree and not so good to a degree. Next, the security news bites. Amazon has decided to roll out their deployment of Office 365 because they don't think Microsoft is secure enough. Most people say this is really a PR stunt on Amazon's part. They want to say, gee, we're really into security, and so we found these problems with Microsoft 365. On the other hand, I'm sure those problems are legitimate, And as a result of that, Microsoft is probably going to go off and make some changes, which is good for everybody. So, thank you, Amazon. Works for me. Next, if you are buying or renting, or whether it's residential or business, you need to consider internet or cellular access. There are still plenty of places with really inadequate availability of internet access and cell. And I can tell you, I rented a building without checking that years ago, and discovered that the hard way it took 9 months to get cell access, or internet access rather. So, if you need help with that, have questions about that, let us know. In light of all the drone hysteria in New Jersey, the feds have banned all drone flight in New Jersey. Um, and we're seeing also a lot of website attacks, and these are just brute force attacks. So if you're not looking at the brute force attack volume level, which I do on our sites, you really need to, because that's a precursor. And if they do that and they manage to find a bug, you might be toast. And yay to North Korea. Their crypto business more than doubled between 2023 and 2024. So they like that. Billions, and, like McDonald's, billions served, well, billions collected in the case of North Korea. Um, and lastly, if the next administration does in fact go after China offensively, uh, China's not going to sit there and ignore it. They're going to strike back, and they're going to strike back with a vengeance. That's my prediction. I don't have any insight there. I don't talk to those guys. Um, but you need to make sure that you're prepared to both detect and defend. And if you're concerned that maybe you're not so prepared to do either of those, then reach out to us, and we'll be happy to work with you to make you better prepared. And until next time, stay safe.